Hello, everyone. Welcome to the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Conversations from the Diaspora with Love, a Building Africa's Future podcast. And this is your sister and your friend, Nkiru. So on today's episode, I'm joined by one of my great friends, another one of my best friends who I've known for so many years of my life. And, I'm going to give her a chance to introduce herself. So, Toy, would you do the honors?
Sure. I am at Toynia B. Edmond. That's TOYNIABEDMOND on all of social media. Like Nkiru said, we've been friends since middle school, best friends since high school, and our 10-year anniversary is coming up. High school anniversary is coming up this year, so it's been almost 2 decades.
Yeah, no, we're getting up there in age.
Yeah, wow, that's so crazy. But I am a moderator in Building Africa's Future. I am a domestic violence survivor and advocate, family advocate. I also have a podcast, 2 podcasts. Just a lot going on.
Oh yeah,
media, you'll see everything.
definitely. So guys, I have 2 other friends who were supposed to join us tonight, but they weren't able to make it. So we will continue this conversation. But just to get things on the road, today we're going to be talking about in the community, what that means to each of us. So as I mentioned tonight, I have my friend Toynia on the line. So she and I are going to kind of bounce off each other. Have been as far as, collectively in the diaspora and individually, what that means. She was born here. I was born in Nigeria. So our experiences will definitely be different, but I'm interested in knowing some of the parallels as well. So I'll start off by saying that I'm a Nigerian American, what some may call a 1.5 or a second generation immigrant, which is something that I'll talk about in a separate episode. I'm Igbo by ethnicity, born in Enugu State, Nigeria, but in my culture, our origin is traced from our father's side. So I am from Anambra State. I've lived the greater part of my life in the U.S., the beautiful city of Charlotte, North Carolina, to be exact. But I currently reside in Newark, New Jersey. So now I wanted to open the floor for discussion. Feel free if there are any things in particular that you want to kind of elaborate on. Some are just kind of basic, simple answers, but feel free to kind of go in and, talk about what you want to talk about, because we just want to get at least a good 45 minutes to an hour going of conversation. Does that sound good?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
All right, perfect. So to start off, in a few words, what is or where is home for you?
So, that's such a loaded question. Home for me would be Charlotte, North Carolina. I've lived many places within the U.S. I was born here, but home for me is, where my parents are, my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, where I go to, to regroup and realign and feel that real love again before I go out into the world to battle adulthood, So home is Charlotte, where the majority of my family is.
Okay. I'm actually glad you answered that way, because my second question, which I actually should have asked it along with the first one, is home where you were born? Is it where you live? Is it where you grew up? Or is it where your family is from? So I think at different points in our lives, we kind of define home differently. Would you say?
Yeah, for sure. Because I was born in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Lived in Greater Philadelphia for a few years. Lived in Chicago. Lived in DC. Lived in Charlotte. Now I live in Greater Atlanta. So I guess you could say I'm a nomad of sorts anyway. But for sure I would say home is where my family is. Okay. I have family in all of these different areas, but I guess where my grandparents are, because they're the foundation.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I know different cultures kind of view foundation and matriarchy and patriarchy differently, but my grandparents, like, they had a large influence, a huge influence in how I was raised and what I believe now and all of that. So going back to where they are and being around them is definitely important to me.
Okay. And I'm actually, just to add to that point, I know, are there ever times in your life where you feel like you don't particularly belong, maybe because of our generation, millennials, so sometimes older generations kind of view us as, whatever they might want to view us. The reason why I ask that is because for me in particular, and I think many people who are in the diaspora, and by diaspora, I'm not referring specifically to the greater group. I'm specifically targeting whose families, like immediate families, come, maybe let's say from the continent. So for me and many in my kind of community, sometimes we don't feel like we always fit in. And with our parents and like their generation, back home, and then like here with us, let's say Black American, which is kind of what I want to kind of look at in tonight's discussion. So to that effect, how do you identify as a Black person, and have you always seen yourself in this way? If not, what changed your perspective?
So Kira laughs at me all the time because I use the term regular Black. Because, okay, so like I said, me and Kira have been friends since middle school, got close to high school, and we started to really intermingle with each other's friends in college. So anytime I would ever go to any like African or whatever event at UNCC, like we went to UNC Charlotte, or like at your church, anything like that, I've always been asked like, "Oh, are you from Ghana? Are you Liberian?" I'm like, "No, I'm from here." And then I get like a frown, like, "Oh, okay." So now I just say like, I'm just regular Black. I'm not from anywhere special or anything like that. I'm just regular Black. I was born here. I'm probably gonna die here.
Oh my gosh!
It is what it is.
So okay, is being regular Black? Do you say that in like is there any kind of negative connotation to that, or is it just how you choose to simplify? Or like, when do you use that expression when you're speaking with African people from the continent, or?
Yes. So, okay. There's this assumption that because I am well spoken when I choose to be, I carry myself well. I was married. I was taking care of my son. That type of thing. That I must have been like from the continent, because the regular Blacks, or the Blacks who were born in the States, they're not educated, and they don't take care of themselves, and they don't know who they are, and that type of thing. So when they hear that I'm regular Black, quote unquote, there's like a shock and a surprise, like, "Oh, really? You're so well spoken," or "I thought you were from Ghana, or I thought you were from Liberia, or or wherever." And I'm like, "No, regular Black." Kind of like I know what the stereotypes are, but that doesn't mean anything. Like, stop listening to the stereotypes, basically.
All right, so Toy, could you continue to elaborate what you were discussing as far as like, stereotypes? You started to mention that.
Yeah, so the reason why, okay, so the first time I saw the term regular Black was when it was like there was a Twitter thread about some like Black kids that go to Harvard, and everybody was assuming because they were at Harvard that they must have been African, because only African Blacks, quote unquote, I guess, whatever, continental Africans are smart enough to go to Harvard. They're the only ones who were like dedicated enough to go to Harvard. So they started using, the hashtag regular Black. Like, I'm regular Black, and I'm also smart enough to go to Harvard. I'm also dedicated enough to go to Harvard. So that's where I got the term regular black. I'm like, yes, I can be just as smart as you are, be as cultured as you are, and be from the U.S.
Exactly. So I guess, like, to kind of continue that point, my next two questions: how do you relate with other members of the diaspora? Specifically with you, how do you relate with, let's say, continental Africans? And have you had positive or negative experiences in the past or even now that you would like to share?
Sure. So for me, it's definitely, it's always both.
Okay.
But I would like to say I've had more positive than negative.
Okay.
I would like to say that. Unfortunately, that's not the truth. I do get a lot of side looks and you don't understand what's going on, or you wouldn't get it because you're not from whatever the country is, whatever. And I mean, I'm sure even some Africans get that. If you're Nigerian and you go to something that's Liberian, if you're from Congo and you go to something that's Nigerian, I mean, I'm sure there's you're not going to understand what's going on kind of vibe in general. But if they find out that you're not from the continent at all, there's like you're like excommunicated from the club completely type of attitude.
And I really hate that. Like, it's such an unfortunate way of thinking, to be honest.
Yeah, because it's literally like, come to our event, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as you say, like, you know, I'm not from anywhere, like I'm regular black, they're just like, oh, well, never mind. Like, okay, what if I still wanted to come to the event? Like, I don't know.
So would you say that you don't always feel welcome?
Yes.
Or...
Yeah. I mean, I know of the stereotypes. I know that they probably had experiences with, you know, U.S. Africans, like if you want to say that, or Black Americans, or whatever, you know, whatever term you want to use. So, you know, they may be looking at from their past experience and they're saying like, you know, we're not going to deal with those type of people or whatever. Because I mean, I grew up hearing people call Africans, what was it stupid? What is the African booty scratcher or something? I mean, you know, and I mean, our friend Steven from middle school and high school, I used to tease him about his accent, just to joke with him. Like, I thought his accent was cute, but you know, we've all kind of played our part in making fun of or whatever of continental Africans at some point. So I try not to look at it on like a personal level, like they don't want me around. It's not that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you. Like, you know, what are some things that you heard kind of either maybe from home, like within your family unit, or maybe, you know, within the, I guess, Black American community? What are their general, I guess you could say, perceptions that they have, or that you all tend to have about us as continental Africans, outside of the, you know, whole African booty scratcher thing? Like, how else would you say, when you had conversations about us, maybe when you were growing up, do you remember any of those conversations? Like, were they negative? Were they positive? I mean, I know your family is very pro, you know, pro-Black, so that's kind of a different experience. But would you say generally, I mean, how would you say maybe your family viewed African people maybe then versus now? Would you say there are any differences or any things you can add to that?
For sure. So it's definitely about how you're brought up, for sure. Like, I never grew up calling any Africans African booty scratchers. Like that wasn't what I was taught. Because I mean, like you said, my family has always been very militant, very pro-Africa, very Sankofa, you know, like reaching back, you know, that type of thing. So, like, I always grew up watching the documentaries and seeing the pictures, and I never saw Africa in a you know, them kids in Africa, they be starving over there. They starving to death in Africa. Like, I never really saw that outside of the those stupid infomercials. You know, for 10 cents a day. You know, those stupid.
Oh man, those were terrible.
So yeah, that was the only time I ever saw like real negative images of Africa. I grew up seeing and reading the positive about Africa. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
yeah, so it wasn't until we moved to Charlotte and I was around more Africans and stuff like that that I heard my peers saying negative things. Like, you know, they smell different or their house smells funny. That type of stuff. Oh, you know,
Okay.
such and such is upset because she got a B on her test. You know how those Africans are. They have to keep straight A's.
Oh, wow. Interesting. I'm surprised that you heard that.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely a different perspective. I didn't expect that you would. Because I know, you know, of course, you and I, we've had these conversations all the time, but I didn't know that outside of maybe you and I or other people like that people thought in the same way, like, oh, maybe they want to always get good grades, or I didn't know that. That's thank you for enlightening me on that. I mean,
like Africans are associated with, like, continental Africans are associated with being like lawyers and doctors and engineers. Like, y'all are the talented 10.
Okay.
Color blacks are, you know,
oh my gosh,
picking up trash and living on welfare, and you know, those are the stereotypes. The welfare queens, whatever. Like, those are the stereotypes.
Yeah,
a bunch of kids out of wedlock.
And it's interesting because we had a somewhat similar experience. Like, you know, I've told you before, my dad, we never, like, he used to always show us all of these videos about like African civilizations and like the role that Black Americans played in so many great things that we have in the world today. So my experience growing up was a very, you know, as it relates to Black American history in particular, it was always a very positive and favorable kind of. But as far as like my relations with, let's say, Black Americans growing up wasn't always the best, only because of that whole, you know, African booty scratcher trope and other negative imagery that obviously the media feeds people, and just like, I guess you could say, a lack of exposure. Thank goodness today we have, you know, social media and the internet and all these other great resources, and people are kind of seeing Africa in a very different and positive light. Of course, you're always going to have your, you know, sorry to say, ignorant people, but
so I have a question for you then. Because, you know, you were born in Nigeria and everything.
Yeah.
When you did see imagery of, I guess, Black Americans, African Americans, whatever, what did it look like outside of the U.S.?
See, that's the challenge because, you know, I came here at such a young age, so it wasn't like, you know, I was watching TV and seeing, you know, oh, wow, you know, for the most part, from what I can remember, Nigeria, as of that time, early 90s, the TV, the stuff that we were watching on TV, again, this is very, I can't really remember because I was only like 3 or 4 at that time. You know, it was more of like, you know, seeing white people on TV and kind of, you know, that kind of, I don't think I was seeing any Black Americans or anything like that. So, yeah, so as far as that, I would say it'll be difficult for me to really answer that, but I do know, you know, some people, they probably, because again, it's what the media feeds us, and Western media, as we all know, is a very powerful, you know, tool. So they kind of portray this negative image, and that's why I guess in different parts of the world, they see America and Black Americans in particular, and usually not so favorable lights. But, you know, like I said, for me, at least for myself and my siblings, my dad was very intentional on like showing us positive Black imagery, you know, documentaries and, you know, all this exposure to like Malcolm X and other great people in Black American history, as well as the Black African diaspora. So, you know, that part of my education, my upbringing was very positive. But as far as like my direct experiences with Black American kids, you know, and I guess some of it you can probably attribute to people being, you know, kids. You know, kids are sometimes, they're mean, but at the same time, I think they also echo what they hear at home, like what you were saying earlier. So if their parents kind of have this, let's say, negative image about Africa, the kids are probably going to in turn, you know, have that same, because, you know, for the longest, people would ask me like, oh, are you from Africa? But they would say it in such a way where it's almost like, you know, they're pitying you. or they're like kind of making a mockery of you. Like, okay,
it's because of the image. Okay, so like I just wanted to point something out. We both talked about how we on television or in some kind of media or some kind of form, we've seen negative imagery of each other.
Exactly.
And it's just crazy because it's like in the States, when you look at, you know, what they're showing on the media in Africa, a lot of it's not true anyway. They're showing like cannibalism, which like there's no real history or a real fact showing that there is any cannibalism in Africa. It's more there's more history of Europeans being cannibalists. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Y'all are all like starving to death. Everybody has HIV AIDS. Everybody's like being raped by their uncle or dad or whoever. Like it's just all like really bad. And then on the flip side, y'all are seeing that, you know, we're all like over sexualized and we're spending money on jewelry and the rap videos and everybody's a baby mama or whatever. Like we're both seeing negative images of each other. So when we come face to face, we're seeing the media, we're seeing the images that we saw, whether they're true or not.
Yeah. Kind of weird questioning of, you know, are you African, as if, you know, just to kind of other you. And I hate the fact that we do this within our communities and, you know, amongst ourselves. Like we live in a world where we're always kind of marginalized and looked at as, oh, these people. And then within our own communities, we do that to ourselves. So that's a very unfortunate thing. Like, you know, back when we were growing up, being called African was pretty much an insult.
Yeah.
So I guess to go to the next question, it's interesting to see how that's changed. So I put you know, after Black Panther and, you know, prior to the release and everything else, we saw like such positive imagery about Black Africanness and all these things. A surge of Black Americans wanting to connect with the continental Africa in ways that we haven't seen before. So some Africans felt that Black Americans were only joining the band because suddenly it was, in quotations, cool. On that.
Yeah, so like I said, I think it's about your community or your bubble. So I grew up around people, around my family. We've like went to Juneteenth every year. Like I still take my son to Juneteenth now. Like that's something I'm continuing. We celebrate Kwanzaa and stuff like that. So I mean, in my community, in my bubble, we've always kind of celebrated that our roots are like truly from Africa. You know, Sankofa, we're reaching back. We're taking some of those principles and, you know, we're trying to use them in our everyday life. But I mean, I think we can circle back to the media topic that we were talking about before. Like now that we have positive images, real positive images of Africa in the media now, mainstream. Like I think Black Panther won like an Oscar or something.
Yeah.
So now that it's fully being celebrated, now I feel like a lot of people are actually comfortable with celebrating it. Like, yeah, you know, Wakanda and Africa, and
yeah,
I feel like it's more so that, not so much like, oh, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. I think everyone is just finally happy to see positive images of Africa now, because we don't get to see a lot of that. You only see the stuff on CNN where you know, it's war torn.
Yeah. So, but you can see why or how many, you know, diaspora kind of or feel, well, they weren't rocking with us before, so why suddenly they want to be all about Wakanda and Africa and everything? Like, you can see why many of us, not me, of course, feel that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with how a lot of other cultures appropriate Black American culture.
Oh yeah,
braids, and cornrows. What did they call them?
Like, was it boxer braids, something like that?
Boxer braids or boxer ropes or something. How they were calling do-rags, silk scarves or something.
Oh my gosh.
It's the same thing. It's like, back then they didn't want me, now I'm hot, they all on me.
Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing. So yeah, I definitely can see the side eye and the frustration, like, all right, here they go. Like, I definitely get it.
But one thing I would say, though, I like the fact that there was and is some level of consistency. I would say in the past maybe 6 years, we've seen like a lot of movement back to Africa, and that's pretty much going to lead us to the next question. So Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo, and I apologize if I said his name incorrectly, he launched a Year of Return for Ghana 2019 initiative to commemorate the 400 years since enslaved Africans first reached Jamestown, Virginia, as a measure of encouraging African diasporans to come to Africa, specifically to Ghana, to settle and invest in the continent. Also seen the popularity of Afrochella in Ghana, as well as a significant number of African Americans traveling and moving back to Africa. So Face to Face Africa reports that Ghana received nearly $2 billion in revenue and over 1 million visitors in last year's, Ghana. So how important is this? Like, what do you think about all of this?
I am jealous because I don't have the money to go. My cousin went last year. When did she go? I think she went in like December, like right before it ended. Okay. But she said it was amazing. Like, she said it was a lot of crying, of course, because you go to
the door of no return, right?
Yes, the place of no return and all of that. I want to go so bad. I think it's amazing. One of the movements for sure that I supported was Marcus Garvey's movement of just wanting to like take a bunch of us and just go back and start over there.
Okay.
And I believe that's how Nigeria was found. Not Nigeria, Liberia was founded.
Yes, that was like
a bunch of ex-slaves or whatever sent over there. And I mean, it wasn't the smoothest transition, but because they were already people there, so it's like now y'all show up and y'all saying y'all taking over. It's kind of like, no, you're not. But that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But at one point, I wanted to go to Africa to like teach English.
Yeah.
I mean, life happened and things changed, but it's always been my goal to go back, to discover, to at some point have some kind of dual citizenship. Like, I definitely am like leaning towards that. I think it would be my grandfather's like wildest dream if I was able to go over there and open a bookstore.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I'm trying to do that somewhat with Harambe Stories podcast. Sharing like stories of the diaspora.
Exactly.
As a whole, it would just be his wildest dream if I could open a bookstore in Ghana.
Oh, that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Actually, don't quote me on this, but if I'm not mistaken, the Ghanaian president, I think he established something where dual citizenship. So, and something about a visa, like a visa free. I don't know. Again, don't quote me, but I think that's a wonderful initiative. So, if people can save their money and travel over there, Ghana is already kind of working towards getting this tourism industry built up, and they made a lot of money with it last year or in the past years or so. So I think this is a great initiative that Ghana is starting, and I really hope to see more tourism industry on the continent, because Kenya and South Africa, Egypt, people kind of know those places, but people don't often there, or East Africa or whatever. So it'll be and it's a typical, I guess, safari and other things like that, but really kind of going to different countries, seeing how people live, and connecting. I wanted to like separate this particular part for another episode. But what can you say about the whole ADOS, or I don't know how to pronounce it, African Descendants of Slaves movement? What do you think about that? And especially as it relates to reparations, what is your stance? Do you care to share?
So, okay. I really just want them to forget student loans. So, okay. That's going to be really complicated. Huh?
So before you get into it, for those who are listening, could you please just explain what exactly reparations are?
Okay, so reparations is basically, I'll relate it to the Jews. So the Jews are given reparations for the Holocaust because it was a horrible event that should not have ever happened, just beyond horrible. So I think some of the people that are still alive, it's not a lot of them left, but they still get like a check every year for like a couple $100 or whatever for reparations because, the Holocaust. So,
yes.
There's a movement saying that African descendants of slaves deserve reparations as well. Now, the reason why that's going to be really hard to do, what I'm with it, I know for sure I am a direct descendant of slaves.
Okay.
My cousin owns about 2 acres of land. It was a little more than 40 acres after slavery ended. But,
Oh, wow.
But, we need to build a highway. We're raising the taxes. They always found ways to kind of take some of the land. But anyway, we have 2 acres of it left. And that was land that we got directly from a former plantation that my family worked on in Belmont, North Carolina.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, so we'll be able to show like, hey, this is our family, we're direct descendants, give us the money, forgive some student loans, give business grants, whatever they decide they're going to do it, if they decide to do it. But it can get really complicated because how African or Black you need to be to get it. You know what I mean? Because there's so many people that are like my great grandmother. Finding your roots.
Yeah.
Everybody finds out that their great grandmother was a slave.
Yeah.
So so do they get some money?
Yeah, it's a complicated conversation, I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be unfair as far as like who gets money, who doesn't, because then you don't want to do the whole paper bag thing. Like if you appear Black, then you get some money, because there's some people that don't quote unquote appear Black that are Black, and it's just going to be really complicated.
So I guess to kind of parallel a little bit with our conversation earlier about Wakanda and continental Africans and how we tend to view Black Americans now due to, I guess, this surge in interest in the continent. I know there are some discussions that people are saying, can continental Africans qualify for reparations? If so, or so I guess that's kind of where this whole ADOS movement started. Like, we, the ones who came here and worked the lands and et cetera, we deserve these reparations. You all who, I guess, willingly came here do not deserve it. So how do you kind of make those parallels between these conversations?
Okay, so it's kind of complicated because I could be wrong, but it looks like people that migrate here are given different advantages than those who are already here, if that makes sense. As far as like opening a business, getting the scholarships to the schools and stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
there just seems to be a surplus of opportunity for migrants in general, not even just Africans, but just migrants in general come here to open up a business. But if I was to come up with a business plan and would go to a bank and try to get a business loan or a grant, I'm being told no. So y'all, it's already kind of looked at as y'all already have an advantage anyway. So why do you need something else? Like,
yeah,
y'all already come in and y'all are like 20 steps ahead of us. We're like under the ground trying to like dig our way up to the surface. So yeah,
that's what we were saying. This conversation really does get kind of tricky, because let's say, for example, I married a Black American, and our children, still have, the dad's lineage from, Black American history and everything else. Like, would they be able to qualify for?
Right. It's just really weird. And then even if, like, how are you determining the lineage? Is it through the mother? Is it through the father? Because, due to mass incarceration, before that, due to like lynchings, a lot of fathers disappeared or died or whatever. So how are you like tracking everything?
Yeah, there has to be some type of solution, better way to kind of address this issue, because it's been over 400 years. And, this discussion needs to be like seriously had. And I'm glad that more people are talking about it, because, I think at a certain point we just kind of thought about it as, some type of passing thing that we were, and by we, I'm just kind of including myself in this conversation, not necessarily saying that I'm part of it, but just as a collective, the collective spirit. We were promised so many things, but, conveniently, as generations have passed, it's like, well, you weren't a slave, or no one alive was a slave. We tend to hear all these different things, or my grandparents had nothing to do with slavery. We hear so many things. So, but anyway, that's definitely going to be a separate episode. But Toy, you mentioned something that I wanted to grab onto before we kind of round up. You mentioned how your family's roots in Belmont, North Carolina. So to that effect, how often do you, do you all share these kinds of stories about your family history? Like, when do these stories come up? Who tells these stories? And how do you plan on, I guess, continuing that legacy with Nate, your son, and, in the future? How do you plan on, I guess, making that come full circle, if that makes sense?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked that. So we need to get back to it. I'll put the bug in my grandmother's ear. So we used to have our family reunions on that land. So every year, Belmont's pretty small. So every year we would go to like the family's church in Belmont. Wow. And we would like eat in the reception hall, and we would all walk down, and my great aunt Clara used to live there, and my cousin and my grandmother would like tell the story of great aunt Clara and the land and all of that. And it was just so like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Like I remember taking my shoes off and like putting my feet on the ground.
Wow.
And just like wanting to really feel that connection.
That's beautiful.
So in a way that I want to continue it is, and I need to call her because I want to do it when I go back to visit in May. I want to interview my grandmother and try to get as much of the lineage that she knows as I can.
Yes.
And I want to record it, because we don't have a family Bible. We don't have a, you know what I mean? Like, how do we keep track of our family and our lineage if we're not asking our elders for it?
Exactly.
So, and I'm also, I'm trying to carry down the traditions as best I can. So I'm learning how to cook as many dishes for my grandmother as I can. Like every time I go to Charlotte, I'm like, what we cooking this time, Nanny? Like, what you gonna see if she how to cook?
See, I love that.
Because I mean, whether you're from the continent or not, we all share our love for each other through food.
That is true.
So yeah, so I just feel like it's important that I learn how to cook the black eyed peas and the collard greens for New Year's Day, and that type of stuff.
Nice. I love that. Like I really want more of us to kind of have this interest in connecting with our elders, because we don't know how long they have with us. And thank goodness we have the technology today to like take their photos, you know, record conversations with them. Like there's so many ways that we can share and preserve these memories that previous generations did not have. So I think we should take advantage of, you know, all of
Yeah.
these
I've been
opportunities.
stealing pictures and stuff. I've been sneaking away pictures. And I've been trying to, because after a while the pictures get old and they start to crumble and stuff. So I've been trying to like scan the pictures and get them on the computer and stuff.
Oh, that's
And
good.
like I'm gonna be the person that's gonna be basically preserving
The historian, the family historian.
yes. I'm the historian in the family, basically.
Nice, I love that.
Yeah.
So Toy, just one quick question, and then we'll just round up from there. In your opinion, or you know, from what we've discussed, and just from what you know or what you feel, what can we do to bridge the gap? You know, this age-old divide between continental Africans and, you know, African Americans in diaspora.
I think what we're continuing to do now because it started with media, it started with the negative images. We have to drown out as many of the negative images that we can with positive images.
Nice.
You have to, have these really tough, hard conversations no matter what. We have to put aside what we were called and stuff like that in our childhoods and come together as adults so that we can build coalition together.
Yes.
Like that's what's going to build Africa's future. Like
righteous.
There should be a call for Black Americans or just people of the diaspora to come back to Africa to help cultivate and build Africa, not the Asians, not the Europeans or anything like that. So yeah, I just feel like coming together in spite of what the history is what's going to help build Africa's future.
Thank you so much for that. Would you say that we are at least kind of making progress from where we were, before, maybe 20 years ago?
Yes. I mean, you just read the statistics saying that so many people went back to Ghana and went back to Africa and are traveling and, all of that to discover the true nature of what Africa is. It's not, war torn and people are starving. Like that's not the only thing that's happening.
Exactly, because we also have that here, right? People are starving here. So it's not just an African thing. Yeah. So Toy, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It really has been wonderful. So I know you kind of touched on a few things that you're working on in the beginning, but I'll just give you a few moments to tell our listeners how they can reach you, any that you're working on, and what you would like to share before we close out.
Okay, so I am at Toynia B. Edmond. Again, that's Toynia Bedmond. I would love to promo my Harambe Stories podcast. It is available on Anchor, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. It is a podcast dedicated to reading Black and African children's stories. I feel like every time I go to look for a story that I want to read to my son, I'm either like given like the different cartoons of animals or it's a story that's centered around white children. My son gets very bored when he doesn't see images that look like him in stories. So I started my own podcast. I'm, reading and promoting other, Black and African stories. If you are an author and you would like your book featured, reach out to me via social media. That's at Toynia B. Edmond. That's all for now, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Toy. All right, guys. So
thank you.
We've had a wonderful time talking with you. And again, we just want to thank you for joining the conversation. Again, this is Conversations from the Diaspora with Love, a Building Africa's Future podcast. Please subscribe. Please share with your friends. And let us know what you would like to talk about in upcoming episodes. And in the meantime, if you would like to contribute, my cash tag is $Nkiru, NKIRUOBOBI. You can contact me via email, buildingafricasfuture@gmail.com. follow on social media, Instagram at African Minded or at Building Africa's Future. And again, you can feel free to subscribe on Anchor, Spotify, Google, and iTunes. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Until next time, I wish you happiness, I wish you love, and be well. All right, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.